Hello, this is John with Theology Ed. This is an important video about the Uprising. So we've been monitoring it for a while. Even before the Buck Moon, we were looking at predictive programming related to the potential for civil unrest in the U.S. related to these protests, the black protests, the response to police violence, brutality, and so on, with respect to minority populations and so on. And we've been watching that for a while, and there's predictive programming about it. We'll review a little of that later in the video. But our focus was on Louisville as things unfolded. So on July 4th, the NFAC, the Not Effing Around Coalition, sort of revealed itself, a black militia with 1,000 people armed, supposedly heavily armed, and appears that they are from the videos, that they showed up in Georgia. And then later in the month, we talked about that, later in the month, on July 25th, they actually went to Louisville to demand justice for Breonna Taylor and swift action of the government, with some threats that if they don't do it, we're going to come back and burn the place down. Okay. And then they said, well, it's not violence we're after, though we're prepared for violence if it's necessary in self-defense or something like that, right? But they were heavily armed, showing up. And they said, we're coming back in 4 weeks. And if we don't have justice, for Breonna, there's going to be significant action of some sort. Who knows what? That they didn't show up 4 weeks later. Before the 4 weeks later date showed up, that would have been August 22nd. They said, well, we're going to come back on September 5th for the Kentucky Derby. Okay, so, and they went there. They were there. There was no major changes at the time. But now, yesterday, September 23rd, the Breonna Taylor decision came in. And no police are convicted of anything. And now we're going to see, or we are seeing already, the changes, protests erupting across the U.S. So here, Breonna Taylor decision, 2 officers shot in Louisville as protests erupt across the U.S. Okay, so the news right now is that we have these protests erupting throughout the country. Almost all major U.S. cities have something going on already. And this just happened, half day ago, roughly. Thousands of people in nearly every major U.S. city saw protesters chanting, say her name, Breonna Taylor, and no justice, no peace. This sort of no justice, no peace. We'll have to see how that develops, if they actually, because there was no justice, will there now be violence? We'll have to see how this develops. This is all new. This just happened. 2 police officers in Louisville were shot and suffered non-life-threatening injuries. One's in surgery, the other one in the hospital. Okay, a car drove through protests in Denver. So we're seeing a lot of action already. Things are picking up. We had the Kentucky governor authorize a limited deployment of the National Guard in Kentucky. So protecting things like hospitals and so on, critical infrastructure, I think was the language used. Protect critical infrastructure. Police deploy chemical agents in Atlanta. All right, you can tell my voice. I'm like losing my voice. This is the second time I record this. The first time the app decided not to save it. So that's a bummer. It's 4:30 a.m. where I'm at, so it's a real bummer. But I didn't want to delay this. I think this is something that needs to be out sooner rather than later, if possible. Now, what we're looking at falls right in line with the timeline we've been discussing. In the Donnie Darko video, for example, in the Donnie Darko series, I explained, related to the Lionsgate and all that these sorts of things, the plans related to the Buck Moon, whatever discord, war, conflict, whatever, appears to really supposed to take off after this Lionsgate. Basically, after Sirius exits the conjunction with the sun and is now visible in the sky again. So mid-August, roughly. And then after that, so we get the June 21st solstice eclipse, followed by the buck moon, July 4th, 5th. Then we have the Lion's Gate. And then basically, after the dog days of summer have ended, we return to the chaos in the U.S. and in the world that was really begun with the first 9/11 attacks in 2001. And so this is going to unfold according to their plans. I can't say what's going to happen specifically. This is going to unfold in a way that is, how do I say it, in line with the plan in IPEC 02, if they pull it off, which would include various different types of attacks, the 5 sharks. So you got your war, probably in the Middle East, you get your civil unrest in the US, you have political unrest, you have the virus pandemic, these various attacks and these things that are going to be unfolding, at least if they plan to unfold, all happening when, see, here's your buck moon, he's looking over and overseeing the chaos that really unfolds in the second half of 2020, picking up after when? Well, September, lining up about mid-August. That's what? About where the dog days of summer end. Okay. And here's where your problems are. These are the 4 worst off kids in this period under the buck moon, where the buck moon's looking at. So you have September, seated. And then October and November, the head collision looks really bad here. November is completely unconscious. October, aside from what you see here, body-wise, is we don't really get a view of it. And December, of course, with the crater seated and all of that. So we have these 4 months appear to be the worst, okay, of 2020. And so we have a lot going on, and this lines up pretty well so far, right? This is what we would expect. Things that began on July between the between the solstice eclipse and the buck moon, the things that sort of took off, started to accelerate and pick up at that time. The pandemic supposedly picked up, a lot of new cases, July 4th. The hospitals were going to be overflowing and apocalyptic scenes in Houston hospitals, all that sort of stuff. That was all July 4th and following, and the escalation of this again, like the second wave almost. Then we had the conflicts in the east, so Asia, China with Hong Kong, China with Taiwan, all of that was starting to really pick up. So China with the Asian tigers, it goes back to the tank scene in IPEC 02. That started to pick up with the solstice eclipse. All of that was starting, this is the transition. It's leading to what's supposed to pick up, really take off after August into the fall, right? You had tensions in the Middle East, Libya, Egypt, Turkey, and elsewhere, these tensions in the Middle East that were picking up at that time. There was the NFAC, this Not Effing Around Coalition, Black Militia emerged, shows up marching on what date? July 4th. There's your Buck Moon Day, right? Oops, Buck Moon date. So we were getting these various things happening. We even had the political stuff going on with the Bolton book and all of that. Okay, so we were seeing this happen, but things were going to pick up. These are part of the transition that leads into this latter half of the year, I think, with the buck moon, which can even go into 2021. For example, if they do get the vaccine out, so the pandemic picks up, maybe they release a real virus at some point that actually is more dangerous than whatever they're talking about now, whether it's a real virus or just a total farce. And then if they do release a vaccine sometime around November 1st or after, it's going to be released initially, very limited basis. They're going to say, people who need it the most, whether it's healthcare providers or people with the worst health profile as far as risks. Okay. And because they're not going to have supposedly the vaccine for everybody right away. And then they're going to continue to release it to more and more people into 2021. So whatever we're looking at here can keep going after this. But either way, we're going to see things, I think, accelerate now. And with the Breonna Taylor thing, the decision and the response today. We're going to have to see how this continues because it seems unlikely it's going to just stop tomorrow. We're going to wake up tomorrow, oh, they're done protesting, whoever's involved in these. We haven't even seen the NFAC show up yet. I mean, I was looking at the news. I've seen very little to nothing about the NFAC commenting on or reacting to the Breonna Taylor decision. So we still have to see how that unfolds. We're going to see what kind of organization they're going to be able to pull off the Black Lives Matter groups throughout the various cities in the U.S. Right. So we're going to wait and see and find out what happens. Now, for people who may not be familiar with what we've gone over before, I'll just do a very brief review of a few things. There's more. Okay, a lot more, and you can go back and watch some of the videos on this. But the Candyman trailer, for example, here you have this jewelry. That's the eclipse. See, this is an annular eclipse. You have the ring of fire around a black hole. Okay, and in the hole, what's causing the eclipse? That's your moon, represented as the buck. After the solstice eclipse, the buck moon was the next full moon. Okay, so we have the buck moon followed by the solstice eclipse associated with what? Well, Candyman, a story about the black man who was brutally murdered in a horrific way, who now comes back to kill people who dare doubt or treat as a game or a joke the suffering he went through in the past. That injustice. He was killed in a horrible way. I forgot the exact details, but hand cut off, or honey poured on him, and bees attacked him and stung him to death. These sorts of things. Okay, so he was killed horrifically, and if they chant his name like 5 times in the mirror, Candyman, 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 and so on, in front of the mirror, and that's like them saying, "Oh, we don't care. This is a game. It's a joke," and that's an offense to him. He comes back and he kills them. So the black man who comes back to slaughter those who forget the injustices done to him. That's the story of Candyman. And he says, be my victim, and I am the writing on the wall. And they show this scene. And here's your eclipse. See the eclipse, black center, ring of fire. Here's your buck rabbit. There's your buck moon. Here's Candyman in the wall. Okay, like a shark attack, really, just like in iPico 2. Okay, and then over here you have the bomb, the 4th. That's your July 4th. That's your buck moon. But notice it also looks like the anarchy sign. So this is the anarchy bomb that the buck is going to watch. It's ignited on the 4th, but won't blow until when? After the buck. The buck's going to watch it. It's exactly what we see here. Okay, that's what we get here. So we have things transitioning here. We talked about that. And then the buck going to watch it. It's going to watch it full. Here it is. Okay, so what started on the 4th, this is your black militant uprising, which is the NFAC marching on the 4th of July in Georgia, going to Kentucky. Now we're seeing the Breonna Taylor decision. Perhaps this is going to be a catalyst. Perhaps this is going to be something that's going to lead to the escalation we've been watching for. We'll have to see. But that could be this could be the bomb that explodes, right? We'll have to watch. We also get in the movie Us, where the people in the underground come up and oppose and try to overthrow systems above ground, and the people above ground very violently. And the family from the underground that gets the most attention initially is a black family. And Gabe in the film says, what are you people? And they say, what are we? And she leans in and she says, we're Americans. These are the Americans who were underground, oppressed, mistreated, abused, and so on, finally coming back. And how are they going to do it? In some sort of demonstration or protest that took a crap load of coordination, and then the killings happen. What songs are being used? What songs are being used? F the police, coming straight from the underground. A young N-word, got it bad, because I'm brown and not the other colors, so police think they have the authority to kill a minority. F that crap. beat a police out of shape, and when I'm finished, bring the yellow tape to tape off the scene of the slaughter. Punk police are afraid of me. Huh. A young N-word on the warpath, and when I'm finished, it's going to be a bloodbath. In other words, from the underground, the brown oppressed people killed by police as though their lives don't matter. Screw that. They're going to come back against the police, and you're going to have to tape off the scene of the slaughter because there's going to be blood. It's going to be a bloodbath. They're on the war path. That's it. That's the story. That's because us is predictive programming about what? The black uprising that's supposed to come with the buck, moon, and following. Okay. IPEC Go 2 has a guy with skull and bones on his arms. That's representing the Skull and Bones Secret Society, probably some sort of a group of elites who arm the black people and send them off with the arms, what it appears, in order to what? Take their lives, take their hope, kill them, and the lights go out. And that's related to possibly, what was going on as far back as the 70s and 80s, but released on the Miami Herald on July 5th, 1987, 33 years to the day before the buck moon in 2020, an article that talked about suspending the Constitution in the case of an uprising and being modeled on a scenario outlined in the scenario modeled in the memo, or outlined in the memo, resembled somewhat a paper by Giuffrida, I don't know how to say his name, Giuffrida, in 1970 at the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, in which he advocated what? Martial law in case of a national uprising by black militants. The paper also advocated to round up and transfer to assembly centers or relocation camps of at least 21 million American Negroes. Okay, that was planned a long time ago. And then we have in the Kingsman series, similar stuff, 5/7/20. So there's your July 5th, 2020 in the trailer. And here is the billionaire Valentine, a brilliant intellect, very successful businessman, a lot of money. But what does he say? Mankind is the virus and I am the cure. But they chose who? Instead of a billionaire in a suit, they chose the billionaire to be in urban clothing. He's a black man. Could have been in a suit. Could have been dressed in a way that would be considered standard for your very wealthy, successful businessman. But instead of that, he's dressed in this urban clothing, which I think is a way to sort of, I don't remember which commenter suggested I use urban clothing. Sometimes I have difficulty choosing vocabulary on sensitive topics. And so I'm trying to follow some of the advice I've been given. If you have better advice and you've got good ideas, please leave them below. But please realize that whenever I'm speaking about these things, I'm just trying to do my best to communicate it in as respectful way for everybody as possible. But either way, so he's dressed in this way, which is an interesting thing to say. Mankind's the virus, 5/7/2020, and what's the cure? Right? And then have him say that, depicting this as though this is led by a black uprising. Okay? And they have the violence in the church. Where? In Kentucky. It starts in Kentucky when he uses his neurological wave whatever weapon in order to cause people to become very, very violent. And the strategy is to bring violence to all the streets of the U.S. and around the world, to have people killing each other on the streets and to depopulate the world through violence like this, through an uprising. And he says, it is a neurological wave that triggers the centers of aggression and switches off inhibitors, appears to use the 5G stuff. Somebody in the comments mentioned that 5/7, I believe G is the seventh letter of the alphabet, right? So 5G, possibly. But I don't know if I want to read too much into that, but that's a possibility. It's an interesting observation because the film does explicitly talk about cell phones and neurological waves and the signal being sent out and all of that. So I don't know. I'm not saying that the 5G is specifically used to trigger centers of aggression and switch off inhibitors, but perhaps 5G figures into the plan in some way. I don't know enough about the science of that. Okay. Additionally, in Second Kingsman, what do they do? This is about a biological weapon, and that leads to martial law, commandeering stadiums, schools, etc., to put the infected or the people that are undesirable into. Oops! Oh no! Let's see. Hope that doesn't open up. I accidentally hit an app. It's going to open up probably in front of me. Anyways, it's not a big deal. So, shoving them into these FEMA centers, basically, places used for FEMA centers like stadiums. And the goal was not to actually save them. The president intended to put them in there, say he's trying to save them. We're trying to protect people, protect the country, all that sort of thing. And we're going to work as hard as we can to save their lives. But in the meanwhile, what are they going to be? They're going to be imprisoned in these camps. They're basically prison camps. Literally, they're caged. And then left to die by a virus. Combine the two films, you get your Uprising, people, martial law being declared, them hauled off to camps, just like the Reagan, the Miami Herald reported about the Reagan period secret government, planning to haul them off, 21 million American Negroes to camps and places. Take them there, where conveniently we now are all suffering through a supposed pandemic where there's this great virus that's going to kill us all. They are going to be dying of a virus in these camps while the government represents itself as just trying to keep the peace and be good and take care of everything. Meanwhile, the real plan is to have undesirables be killed off in camps. See, that's the idea. I think that's one plausible interpretation of what's being communicated in the Kingsman predictive programming from part 1 and part 2. Right. And interestingly, something related to the virus puts people in a manic state, so mania. I'm not sure how that would maybe figure into the virus leading to supposed virus leading to supposed behavior that contributes to the protest or violence or whatever. I don't know. All of this, we really don't know because we haven't experienced the future yet, right? So we're just going to have to look and watch. But things are falling plausibly in place. And so we'll watch, see what happens. And that's all you have. Oh, and it is interesting. I was curious, is there going to be any? We've had a lot of hurricanes and things this year already. We've also got the wildfires in the West that are ridiculous right now. We've got this violence, protests. We've got talk about the vaccine being released this year into next year, possibly as early as November. Like I said, limited distribution or something if they do that probably. But they're working towards it. They're trying to get this going. We're watching a lot of really dangerous, crazy stuff happen all at once. This is that phase 2 of Get Out, it seems like, right? Where, the chaos it's one thing after another until people are broken, right? And if you haven't personally been affected by it yet, it may or may not come to you, but it'll certainly be all over your TVs all the time, right? And so this is just being thrown at people left and right as they prepare for the next phase. This is the replacement of the old with what's new. Okay, so if you haven't watched the Get Out predictive programming video, I recommend you watch that. I think it's an important one to understand what they're doing as a whole. But that's all I have for now. Like, subscribe, share. Let people know about the video. Right? If you want to share it with your friends on whatever social media you use. That's a great way to get the word out. But we're in a really dangerous situation, I think, now. So it's probably good for people to be aware of what's going on. All right. Blessings. Take care.